Welcome back to the Woke Blokes podcast. I am the one and only host at the moment, Nick Sutherland, the miracle of McRae, the Sultan of Still, the guru of golf, and Hass has unfortunately died in a freak accident. He got hit by lightning whilst driving off a cliff and then got eaten by a shark. So it was a severe run of tragedies that have unfortunately ended what was a pretty good run. So I've thrown the net out wide and far and have happened to land a temporary co-host slash guest slash client slash mental health practitioner, and we have the what can we call him, the existential crisisist, Mitch joining us again. Mitch has been on an episode before in which he spoke about his journey, and he is transitioning from being a client to now starting his own practice, and then hopefully he'll be doing some work with Myndfit in the future. So Mitch, welcome.
So it's a lengthy, meaty introduction to follow, and maybe we should caveat for those listening that hasn't actually died, but by freak.
Oh yeah, well, Hass is recording a lot of content for the Centre for Healing, some new programs they're doing. So I just wanted to keep the ball rolling, and just thought it'd be an opportunity to get some fresh energy in. Hass doesn't bring a lot to the table, if we're completely honest. So
I was thinking I've actually got big shoes to fill, filling Hass's shoes.
No, the bar's very low. So even he said, he goes, I'm just the looks. So Mitch has turned up. He's got his hair neatly done. He's got his Playboy t-shirt on there, and shout out to Hugh Hefner.
For those listening and not watching, it's a dove. It's not a bunny with rabbit ears.
It's a dove.
I don't have as big as biceps as Hass either. So
no, I don't think many people do. So, but I can just hear his ego perking up right now. He's probably in the middle of recording something, and he just heard his ego heard in the ether that he's got big biceps, and he's just sort of sat up a bit straighter and taller. Welcome, Mitch. Thank you for joining us. I threw you in the deep end last night. It was didn't give you much time, but here we are.
I think it was 48 hours notice to come on, and then 24 hours notice less than to bring up a topic.
Yeah. So you've thrown a few topics at me. If I just pull the list up. So unconscious mind / beliefs, practical philosophy, hypnotherapy and its benefits, the pitfalls of self-development, what is doing the work. I think we've touched on that in an episode. The power of silence, and then understanding the nuances of attachment. So it's a wonderful list you've come up with there. And I think we'll start with the understanding the nuances of attachment. What was anything specific that you had there? Let's do a bit of a Q&A.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's obviously comes from Buddhism originally. So like the Four Noble Truths, as you've well known, you've probably taught me more than anyone about, the cause of suffering is attachment and ignorance, and then understanding, well, what does that actually mean, and what was the Buddha talking about?
I'm really glad that you included ignorance in that, because a lot of people stop at attachment. So I'll start with ignorance, because that is equally as important as attachment. And ignorance causes suffering because we simply don't know. We don't know so much. We are so, and when we use the word ignorance in this line of work, it's meant literally. It's typically people's association with the word ignorant is more of a judgment of someone. Oh, you're so ignorant, and they're trying to put someone down. So I need to specify that we're using it in a literal sense. We know so very, 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 very little about anything outside of ourselves and our own experience. So ignorance, the mind doesn't like the unknown. It would prefer to fill in the blanks with a doom and gloom story. An untrained mind will create a doom and gloom story, a worst case scenario, and prefer that over a blank canvas. The unknown unsettles the mind. So being ignorant of the future, what the future holds, and what's going to happen if I send this AMR? What would happen if I ask this person out on a date? What will there's so much anxiety caused by the
Yeah.
unknown.
Yeah, I think Alan Watts talks about it well. To your point before, it's instead of ignorance, it's like ignorance. You're ignoring certain aspects of reality. You're not conscious of certain things that are happening, and that's where the fear comes in. Speaking about unconscious fears, you can't control what you don't know.
No,
I think
and
it's
anxiety is a controlling nature. We start to, as Alan Singer says, we try and manipulate the world around us to be a certain way in order to placate that anxiety. So we become heavily reliant on the external and the unknown future being in alignment with our preferences. But when we're in suffering, we then project our suffering onto the world around us too, which is fun. And if someone is speeding past you, and a person yells out in their car, "Oh, you fucking idiot," or whatever. That person speeding past you has no idea that you actually just did anything, so it's not changing anything. But B, you've got no idea what they've got going on in their life. So here you are, just jumping to a conclusion, going to the worst case scenario, blaming them, comparing them, labeling them, thinking they should be. So a whole gamut of distortions are employed in that split second. So you're looking at the world through that distorted lens.
yeah, it's the ego superimposing a narrative over reality. And I think that's probably what the Buddha ultimately meant, is that there's a pure reality there, and then we superpose a kind of relative reality over the top, a story.
Well, funny you mention that, because I was just chatting to a client last night about, and that's the tab that's open on my browser. In Buddhism, happiness is achieved when a person can perceive the true nature of reality unmodified by the mental constructs that we superimpose upon it. So the reality is, car is driving faster than the man-made speed limit, and that's it. And that's as far as it needs to go. Anything beyond that is just unnecessary. It's just
Can you
conjecture.
imagine
It's
how
just
beige and vanilla society would be if we all thought like that? We all thought in clear constructs.
well, I mean that definition, I don't think it's written by Buddhists, because happiness isn't really used in Buddhism. It's contentedness, at peace. I'm at peace with someone speeding past me, um, because it's out of my control, and I can't do anything about it other than just observe that it's occurring. So I don't know. Would you? It would be an interesting world. I don't know how beige and boring it would be. Imagine imagine what we could do with the military budget if we didn't need a military budget.
Yeah, I think everything would be like kind of orderly and clean, less chaos, I guess.
It'd just be enjoy. I think it'd be, yeah. Once again, you don't want a perfect world. You don't want an ego's definition of a utopian world.
Mm.
The tragedy, the horror, the suffering, it's all perfect. So yeah, you certainly wouldn't want just a one-dimensional or one-layered existence, because there'd be nothing to contrast it. So in that regard, it's all necessary.
Yeah, it makes me think of Zen Buddhism. Zen Buddhism's like a Chinese sect or a Japanese sect of Buddhism. And if you look at all their, like I was reading an article talking about a lot of Zen artwork and paintings, and Zen practitioners are, they use the mind to obtain enlightenment, essentially the ultimate end through Buddhist principles. But a lot of their artwork and paintings is quite like clean, crisp lines and detailing, and quite like light, vibrant colors. And then, the article was talking about in contrast to some of the kind of artwork through the how do you say that word?
Renaissance.
Renaissance period, which is more like, a lot of kind of chaos, thick, dense colors, and just kind of how they were saying it reflects like different states of the human psyche and mind through different periods.
Yeah, I can't think of the artist's name, but it's Heaven and Hell. Dante, maybe. Yeah,
Dante's
it's a
Inferno.
hey.
Dante's Inferno? Is that a movie or is that a painting?
Maybe, yeah, something along those lines. Anyway, it's heaven and hell, and so if you think of the yin and yang symbol, dark and light, and there's a little bit of light and dark, and a little bit of dark and light. It's we are the whole thing in doing professional development or whatever you want to call it, psychotherapy, or I don't know, however people want to relate to it. There's talk about the shadow self, and there's in Myndfit we talk about purities and impurities, and the attachments that we're talking about earlier. They're considered the impurities, of which we all have them, and certain situations and events. If you're the person in the car that yells at the person speeding, all that's doing is revealing your impurity, your attachment and desire and ignorance. So you desire them to be more in line with how you would prefer the world to be.
Yeah, spot on. I think it's coming from the unconscious side of the mind as well. What, as you just said, the shadow side, which I think Carl Jung first termed, was talking about people's unconscious side, shadow, because it's dark and obscured and you can't see it. And about
Now, I think it was actually first talked about by Maynard James Keenan from Tool. He talks about my shadow self, but they could have done it around the same time. But yes,
maybe Tool was credit to you.
and that's people. So when we're talking about attachment at Myndfit, we describe it as an aversion and a desire happening simultaneously. So I want this and I don't want that. I want a nice meal and I don't want a bad meal. I want to go to the beach and I don't want it to rain. It's happening at the same time.
Yeah, two sides of the same coin. Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine all the people in the world all walking around with these desires, these cravings, this clinging, as we call it, for things to be a certain way. Like it's like the world's been torn and twisted in so many different directions, and it all comes down to the ego. And then you zoom out of that and pretend that you're the universe, looking down at all these humans trying to manipulate the world around them, and you're just laughing, going, none of you are actually in control. None of you actually have any idea what you're doing. I'm the one that's actually, putting everything as it needs to be. But the ego has this hilarious illusion of grandeur that thinks it's more powerful than a universe.
Cosmic universe.
Yeah. So we're hilarious creatures. But so that attachment, the aversion and desire, people form a desire to be good more often. That they look at themselves in the world through that dualistic or binary lens of it's all good and bad and right and wrong, positive and negative, succeed and fail. And so they desire to be a pure person. Someone may have turned up like that. And they have a deep aversion to their shadow self. And so when that's occurring, you're immediately in conflict with yourself, and your relationship to the self is the primary and most important relationship there is. So on that base sort of fundamental level, you're already in conflict, you're already in
Yeah.
suffering.
Yeah. And I think a lot of those beliefs, well, particularly in my case, I can speak to it, they do feel like they're unconscious. A lot of, so why do people self-sabotage? Well, in theory, we shouldn't be self-sabotaging, but there's one part of themselves that's unconscious, which is feeding or conflicting with another part of themselves that would desire a different outcome. It's why can't we quit smoking? Well, one part of us, the shadow part, really enjoys what it gives you, and the conscious part knows they shouldn't, quote unquote, but there's that inner conflict.
Yeah, so we talk to clients about that, like the conscious and the subconscious mind are out of alignment.
Yeah.
The conscious mind is responsible for roughly 96% of what we do. It's all our programming. It's like if you think of yourself as a computer, you've got a processor, you've got a memory, you've got some bugs in the system and bugs in the programming. They're the impurities. But so much of what we're doing is coming from that unconscious mind. So it's vastly more powerful than the conscious mind. So the conscious mind will go, oh, yeah, I'd like to stop smoking. And the unconscious mind is like, hang on, but I identify as a smoker. I am a smoker. So you're thinking, that's all it is. Your thinking around becoming a non-smoker doesn't fit that. So I'm going to reject that silly notion and we're going to light up another cigarette. Or in my case, it was smoking was my best friend. So I was in a codependent relationship with it because, it was there through all the tough times in my life. It was there through all the challenges. It was the one thing I could rely and depend on. And unknowingly at the time, it helped me to focus on my breathing. So smoking was a vehicle to help me to meditate, in inverted commas.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it was like it was serving a purpose, even though it was maladaptive. It was still adaptive for you in those dark periods.
It was a solution for a lot of problems. So, and that's why when I was doing hypnotherapy, that's why if someone wanted help to stop smoking, I'd be my first thing was to really unpack and discover what their relationship to smoking was, because if they were codependent on it and I took that away, A, they'd just replace it with something else, or B, they'd fall down and struggle. So we had to make sure that they were emotionally able to go through the day without that need really driving.
Yeah, it's a crutch or a coping mechanism, and they're using it to alleviate whatever suffering they're in, which is usually going to be emotional of some sort. And then you take that away. That's one of the things that now being a hypnotherapist myself and treating clients with smoking cessation, there's a few things to consider. You really have to make sure they want to quit, and I'm more or less useless if they don't have the belief that they can actually quit and maintain that cessation.
No, but the problem with hypnotherapy is that it's got a stigma around it. It's got a couple of stigmas. One, that it's a magic wand or it's a cure-all. So they turn up with an expectation, which can work in the hypnotherapist's favour because they're already turning up, with an expectation that it's going to work, and so they're more open and susceptible to that. Or it can go the other way. And if they have an expectation and it doesn't work because subconsciously they're not ready, then the hypnotherapist can fail in their eyes, and there's bad word of mouth. So really, I used to talk about the relationship. I used to talk about cigarettes as a human, and I'd say, if cigarettes was a human, what would your relationship with this person be? What are they bringing to the table? And it was fascinating what came up. And some people say, "Oh, it'd tap me on the shoulder and take me out of work for 5 minutes just to take a break and to calm down." I was like, "Okay, so how is it helping you to calm down?" It's just it's just making me get out of work. I'm like, no, but what's it forcing you to do? And they eventually come around to understand it's forcing you to focus on your breath. Breathe in, breathe out, inhale, exhale. And I said, so you could do that without the cigarette. And the irony is that the cigarette takes oxygen out of your system, so it actually forces you to put your body in a higher state of stress. But it creates the illusion of calm. And so imagine going out for that 5-minute break and just focusing on your breath without the cigarette. You would genuinely, physically and mentally feel calmer. You're like, oh yeah, right. And what else is this person bringing to your life? Well, they're costing you money. They're taking years off your life. They're making you stink and antisocial, and like but it's done non-judgmentally, because if you start to threaten or attack that relationship, they're going to guard it and defend it. So got to be very careful with it.
Yeah, it's an interesting association. I think the other component of it as well is usually they smoke in groups, so it brings them social connection. You know, the smokers area or outside of the bar or whatever it is, they can chat to other people. There's respite from whatever they're going through, connection.
Yeah, totally. And we were just talking to clients yesterday about, a default can be to come back to the definition of health, which is a state of complete mental, physical, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So it's not just not being sick; it's actually thriving in that mental, physical, and social areas. And I get a lot of clients, really interesting clients, turn up and they're like, I'm going to the gym, 6 or 7 days a week. Some clients go to the gym like 9 times a week. I'm like, there's only 7 days in the week. How are you? Yeah, I go twice on Sundays and twice on Thursdays. Okay, great. So we can form unhealthy relationships with things that we consider to be healthy. So going to the gym 9 times a week would be an unhealthy relationship. The exercise, and chatting to this client, and it goes back to your smoking and being social. So mental, physical, and social. If you rob Peter to pay Paul, it's all about balance. So imagine there are 3 test tubes full of water up to a line that says 8, and it goes from 0 to 10. If you go to the gym more, you're taking out of the social. You know what I mean? So if exercise goes up to 10, then social is going to drop down to 6, because you spent the time that you spend at the gym, you're taking away. So for people who are smoking, yes, they're getting the social element, but it's detracting from the physical health. So it's really interesting how one solution can actually become a problem, or the root cause of another problem.
And how do you navigate that, finding that harmonious balance that's kind of ever changing and elusive?
Well, yeah, but by understanding that there is an ebb or flow to it. But for me, it just comes down to being mindful and conscious of it, right? If I'm consciously going to start increasing my exercise or whatever, I've got to do so with the understanding that it's probably going to detract from my social, or my mental health will become reliant on the chemicals that I create while I'm exercising. So it's, I don't know, once again, there's no right or wrong. I don't want to sit here and profess to be the grand poobah of anything. It's just if you're consciously aware of things, that's the most important thing. If you're making deliberate, conscious, decisions from being in the present moment, then you're
That's
in a
usually going to be
position
optimal. I mean, yeah, Jung, just keep going back to Jung. He talks about our life's journey is making the unconscious conscious, which is what you're talking about, is really bringing light and attention to the present moment, making a lot of our beliefs that may be informing a lot of our behavior more conscious, so we can, consciously choose what might be the healthier solution in any given moment, as opposed to relying on, things to kind of get us through the day that might be fed by those unconscious beliefs that we can't see.
Yeah, well, I mean, go back to the discovery session, the first session we have with a Myndfit client, and we talk about the 5 steps to change. Awareness is the first step to change. You can't it's not a problem until someone can identify that it's a problem. So if someone's mindlessly going to the gym 9 times a week and they think it's good, then it's not a problem for them. So it's not for me to sit here and go, you have a problem. It's for me to sit here and hold up a non-judgmental mirror and unpack it and lead with curiosity and say, all right, well, this is the definition of health, and this is what you're doing. And, we talk about balance. And so would you say that your exercise regime is within the healthy parameters of balance? And it's for them to come into that. Yeah, it's probably not. Okay, well, what do you think needs to happen? All right, well, I probably need to taper that back a bit. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, client yesterday, was it yesterday? First session with me. Yeah, he wants to go to the start of boxing, but wants to meditate and stretch every day as well. So he runs his own business as a plumber. He's got a family with kids, and then he wants to get up and train and meditate and stretch. And I was just like, interesting. I'm going to be fascinated to see how you go with this. And we unpacked it playfully, and then he came to the conclusion that, all right, I'll try and stretch every day, but I'll box on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I'll meditate Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. I'll have Sunday off. I'm like, just do it as an experiment. Let's get out of this right and wrong and what should or shouldn't I do. We can avoid those traps completely by just exploring and experimenting and coming back to that. My default position is I don't know. So it sounds counterintuitive to what we we're talking about earlier from ignorance, but it's not an ego driven ignorance. It's a genuine contentedness. I'm at peace with I don't know. But what we can do is do an experiment and just try it for 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks. Just put this in place and see what happens, check in with how you feel and make the adjustments from there.
Yeah. I think that's, as we're saying, life is, or reality is just constantly changing and flowing. So I mean, I don't think you need to have this kind of meticulous anxiety about keeping balance all the time, every time. But it's about, as you're saying, just checking in and having someone, I mean, particularly having someone to bounce ideas off and go, is this what needs to be done right now? Or could something be improved or changed?
Einstein said balance is like riding a bike. It's not being perfectly still. So people have this misunderstanding that if I'm in balance, I have to create a habit, create a timetable around something, and I have to stick to it, and it has to be a rigid, regimented regime, and then I will be in balance. And Einstein would offer that that's not balance. That's being too rigid. That will in fact throw you out of balance. So balance is being adaptive.
If life was static or stagnant, then that approach would work, that rigidity. But it's fundamentally not. It's constantly changing. I mean, that's one of the noble truths. Everything's impermanent and changing. It pays to have that approach.
Not sure if it's a noble truth, is it? It's a universal law, the law of nature. Is it a noble truth?
What's the third noble truth? Isn't it the way out of suffering's everything's impermanent?
No, it's to let go.
To let go. Well, I mean, it's to let go of that needing everything to be a certain way, needing everything to be rigid, perfect.
Yeah. The two underpinning philosophies of the Myndfit program is the law of nature, that everything's impermanent, so everything's ever changing, coming and going, ebbing and flowing, toing and froing. And the source of all suffering is attachment and ignorance. So once again, it's human nature we're talking about here. We're not saying anyone's doing anything right or wrong. It's human nature to form these desires to have X, Y, and Z in place. As soon as you do that, you're in a primary state of suffering, anxiety, because what happens if you don't get it all? So you're white knuckling it, and then if you attain everything that you desire, then you're still going to be in suffering, because what happens if it's taken away from me, or what happens if I
Yeah.
lose it, or what happens if it's
It's
so.
impermanent. It's constantly changing. Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It's like we get what we want, but then it's temporary, and then we lose it, and then we don't like what we don't want, and then that changes and comes back again. It's yeah.
If we do get what we don't want, we suffer, and if we don't get what we do want, we suffer.
Mm.
So that's the first noble truth: to live is to suffer. There's going to be, we are humans. We around us, Mitch Siege, they were both trying to escape their humanity. They're both trying to ascend this incarnation and become enlightened beings in this one lifetime. and and they thankfully both realized, after years of not getting anywhere near where they wanted to be, to give that notion up and just embrace the humanity, accept that we're flawed creatures, we're imperfect, we do create suffering, we're so irrational, we're emotional beings first and foremost. Logic and reason and rationality tend to come second.
There was a quote I heard somewhere that said, trying to be perfect is an act of cruelty because we're inherently imperfect beings. That kind of hit me because yeah, I think it's probably still a work in progress. I mean, some sense, but
And
yeah,
what's wrong with being human?
well, we literally can't be perfect. That doesn't exist. And then yeah, I mean,
Well,
there's
once
some
again,
bit.
transcend the way people talk about perfect is from an ego sense. That's this ego's notion. It's filled with attachments. That if when I am X, Y, and Z, then I'll be happy, and that's all. That's not a person living a free life.
Yeah,
That's the ego
yeah,
driving it all. So
yeah,
think about two levels. On the top level, it's a surface level, it's ego, and then underneath that, there's a soul level or whatever. Everything on that soul level, everything is perfect because it's happening exactly as it's meant to happen. It's all necessary. It's all amazing, and that's where learning to operate on a simultaneous level, or non-dualistically, is so liberating, because you don't get caught in this trap of, I can only operate on this level, or I have to operate on that's the trap you fell into. You were trying to escape the surface level, and you only wanted to exist in the bottom level. But you didn't understand that was the ego trying to escape itself, which is still the ego. So here, the ego creates this illusion of I don't exist and I'm beyond myself already, and it's just like, no, you're not. You are literally driving it all.
and so the ego is a hole of mirrors that you can't escape. Okay.
Totally. So and some clients turn up here once again with a misconception that, next thing, they help me transcend the ego, and I'm like, but that's your ego wanting to transcend itself. That's you having an aversion to this incarnation and to all of the karma associated with it. So let's surrender. When we talk about surrendering, let's give up those impurities, let's give up those desires and embrace our humanity, embrace our ego. Let's sit in observation and learn more about the ego. Understanding is the cornerstone to love. Let's learn to love our egos and laugh with them and notice when they're trying to get active and involved. And then we're in a position to very gently make those corrections and adjustments. But it's the dance of it all.
Yeah, the game. I mean, the times that I've been the most happy is when I have let go, truly kind of just let go of any expectation of. And I think most people would agree that kind of happiness or joy is kind of spontaneous in a way. It's when they least expect it.
It's just such a paradox. It's lost just such a never-ending irony, because
It is.
as soon as you let it all go, it all becomes available. It's
Yeah.
as soon as you stop desiring things, as soon as you stop desiring peace, you'll become at peace. It's like, stop chasing everything and just to sit there and allow it to turn up.
It's definitely irony from the gods, isn't it? Let's just make it the most kind of counterintuitive, complicated thing for humans to get from the ego level.
Totally. This client yesterday was just, his brain was exploding because it's so simple. It's like so simple.
That sounds like me.
And he even said, he goes, he goes, my mind can't comprehend or be at peace with the simplicity of it, because it goes into this analytical mode and tries to have it all figured out. And I'm like, I know, that's why we say it's simple to be happy. The theory of happiness or being content is just to let go and just to be and just to observe and let everything be fascinating. And that's great in theory. So it's simple to be happy, but it's difficult to be simple. It's very takes years and 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 never-ending story to continually turn up and notice when those desires are forming and to surrender them and let them go. It takes more strength to let go than it takes to hold on.
Yeah, I think that's a big truism. But it really does take courage to let go of what you're holding on to. And I think a lot of healing is really about letting go. It's letting go of the old narrative, the old story, the old patterns, emotional patterns, physical patterns.
It's letting go of being a victim. That's what it's letting go of this whole notion that they did this to me, or it's unfair that this happened, or it's letting go on the deepest level of this attachment, an aversion to what you've experienced, and a desire to not have experienced it.
Yeah, it's kind of like your analogy before with the cigarettes being the friend. It's kind of the victim identity is kind of that insidious friend that, and this is speaking from personal experience as well. I'm definitely guilty of it and probably still am. But it's like it's familiar, it's safe, it's the known. Whereas letting go of that identity, no matter how detrimental it probably is to your actual health and well-being, it's familiar, so you cling on to it.
But
It's
it's
hard to
the
let go.
ignorance, it's the fear of the unknown. Who am I without this narrative that I've been carrying around and cultivating for many years? Who am I
Yeah,
if I let go of identifying as a victim? Who am I if I and that's a person that's stuck on that ego surface level. And when you transcend that and it stops being about who am I and it becomes about what am I, and
mm,
then it's just amazing, because then we're in, all I am is conscious awareness of the fact that there's a human named Mitch going through this life, and he didn't have a bad childhood. He had a childhood, and within that childhood, there were some pleasant experiences, and there was love, and there was affection, and there were some unpleasant experiences, and he could have interpreted that as not being loved, but none of that's true. It becomes the truth for the person when they form a belief system around it.
it's subjective truth, relative truth to
Yeah,
whatever they're experiencing, or whatever they perceived they experienced, I guess, more than what they actually experienced.
yeah. So there's that Ram Dass thing where he talks about escaping the polarity. And he says a lot of people try to counteract the I am not good enough with I am good enough. In other words, they take the opposite and they try to invest it. That still keeps the world at the level of polarities. So North Pole, South Pole, it creates a spectrum. So the act is not to go to the world of I am good to counteract I am bad, or I am lovable as opposed to I am unlovable, but go behind it to I am. And I am includes the fact that I do crappy things and I do beautiful things and I get neurotic and I feel at peace at times and I try and escape my humanness, and then I accept my humanness and I do all of that and everything includes it and I just am.
Sounds simple. I don't know. For me, like one of the I guess scariest transitions or something like, or I don't even know if it's a transition, but like as you were saying before, moving from an ego awareness to more of a recognition as conscious awareness. That's kind of I guess in part that is kind of the spiritual journey is moving to that eye behind the eye.
Just
Okay.
cultivating the witness. Just, I said to someone a while ago, you know, everything that you think and that you feel, if you identify as that, then that's what you'll consider yourself to be. But I said, who's the person that's noticing that you're thinking and that you're feeling? And they looked quite confused for a while, and then the penny dropped, and this dawn of realization, this realization dawned on them, and it was just the most beautiful thing to watch. And I, oh, that's what I am. I'm the noticer that there is thoughts and feelings. And I'm like, yes, congratulations, you've reached
Yeah,
enlightenment.
yeah, that's impressive. Well, I mean, yeah, you literally can't be anything that you're aware of, I guess is the simple equation.
Yeah. So that Ram Dass thing, he's essentially talking about getting out of that black and whites, right, wrong, good or bad, lovable, unlovable. People just stay so trapped in that it's fair or it's unfair. It's only one end of the other end of the spectrum. And so, that's sort of stage one, I guess. Stage two, sometimes when someone's stuck at one end of the spectrum, I'll invite them to go to the other end of the spectrum. So it creates the spectrum because they're only stuck here. So I am unlovable. All right, let's go to I am lovable. So all of a sudden, now there's a whole spectrum. And now stage three is let's transcend that and go to you just are. Sometimes you're loved, sometimes you're not loved. And all of that's okay because completely unrealistic to think that every person on the planet is going to love you. So I don't want to take people from point A to point Z in the blink of an eye. It's a leap too far sometimes. So we're going to take those incremental steps.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, is there a point that there is a Z? Is it just like an ongoing journey of I mean my understanding of the kind of spiritual journey or the Buddhist path is more of a process of un unbecoming or letting go, and if that makes sense. It's like
Yeah, yeah,
it's less about
yeah.
obtaining and gaining. It's more about detracting and subtracting more, something like
Well,
that.
once again, Ram Dass has said it's about becoming nobody. I just found something yesterday that is aligned with that. To become learned or learned, each day add something. To become enlightened, each day drop something.
Yeah, there you go. That's what I was trying to say. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
once again, it's in none of the scriptures or texts or philosophies from any of the masters. It's not about becoming more, adding more, accumulating more, or going faster or getting there quicker. It's all about having less and going slower, and that is against human nature. Someone's coined the phrase "the human race," and it's fascinating. It's like it's literally people are in such competition with one another, and that's all ego. It's just
Yeah.
a client literally said to me yesterday. She said, I try and win arguments, and because I'm a very competitive person. I was just like, wow, can, can you hear that? I said, that'd be great, if you're a sports person, but that you're a mother and a wife and a friend and a family member and a colleague. It's
Sounds like my
you need to
sister.
be you need to be in
Lost in
competition.
Yeah.
So I sent her another quote. It says the point of the aim of arguments or discussion should be progress, not victory.
Yeah, I like that. That's a nice way to frame it. Kind of trying to reach the truth together.
Yeah, or there is no truth. The truth is experiential. The truth is subjective. Your truth's different to my truth, and that's the problem with the world. Or everyone's egos are walking around trying to convince everyone they come into contact with them their truth, and that's
Yeah.
just all it does is create conflict and chaos. So, you have your truth, and your truth is that this is God, and this is how the world should be, and this is how you prefer things to be. Oh, how wonderful! I hope that's working for you. Well, it's not. I'm in a lot of suffering. All right. Well, that's your jam. And my truth is that we can just let go and sit here and observe and be really at peace. Well, that sounds nice. Yeah, but it's difficult. No, I don't want it then. I'm
So
just trying to keep trying to find a quick fix. I'll try and medicate the stuff that I'm creating for myself.
yeah, that's interesting. Well, I mean, I've been on medication. It's it's more of a numbing agent and does produce some temporary relief, but yeah, it doesn't address the underlying cause, which yeah, I mean, stems from suffering from attachment and ignorance, essentially.
We're watching Em and I watching a show on Netflix last night called The Empress, I think. So it's about in the 1800s Austria, sort of Europe. And the main character, the Empress, has a difficult childbirth and gets an infection and goes into a fever sort of dream. And she just witnessed someone getting killed, and so they sort of showed a bit of the dream, and she kept seeing this person, or thinking she saw this person. So she was having these lucid sort of experiences. A doctor came along and was trying to heal her, and he's saying that there's nothing wrong. She's just experienced trauma, blah 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 blah. And then the mother-in-law, who's a bit of a wicked witch sort of character, said, "All right, we're getting a new doctor. I don't want to hear what you have to say. I don't want your truth. I don't want to, we just need to medicate her. Get me another doctor." And this is so hilarious. It's such a reflection of society. And so she finally found a doctor who said, "Yes, she's crazy. Let's just medicate her." And so he, gave her heaps of morphine and knocked her out. And I noticed this really interesting thing going on internally for me. It was like my ego started to get involved, and it was getting a bit judgy. It was like, this is a bad doctor. Where's the good doctor? Because he's a good doctor because he's more trying to attend to the root cause, and he's trying to work with her instead of against her, and he's not trying to take the shortcut or the quick fix or anything. But when I heard that, I sort of intervened. I was like, all right, let's just sit back and see what happens. And then it dawned on me that maybe knocking her out for a while, maybe letting her rest would be more beneficial to her, because she could have a deep rest and she may wake up. And so it was really interesting. I've spent the whole day teaching people this, and I go home and switch off and watch a show, and then all of a sudden I have to become my own client. I have to turn up for myself and do that work, and not my ego have an opinion on what's right and wrong, because it's again, there is, for me, there's no absolute truth.
Yeah, it has its place. I think it's good at medication's good at triaging early on. I think when someone's in deep suffering, to give that kind of respite and rest. But yeah,
it's effective when it could help someone. Like if someone's in World War II and everything, like horrific injuries, and there's cases where someone had lost a leg, but the adrenaline would kick in and they'd still be trying to run all over the shop and trying to, do this, which would make the heart rate go, which would make the blood pump out faster. So knocking them out was the appropriate thing. So that's where we use a tool called Do What's Required. And doing what's required transcends the ego in that moment. It stops being about what I think or what my belief system is or what my preferences are or my biases or prejudices are, and it's about do what's required. And so clients will hear me talk about how black and white is a distortion and it's destructive and it causes suffering and whatnot. But when it's done mindfully and consciously and deliberately, black and white can actually be quite effective. But
Well, that's
only,
interesting.
only when it's used constructively. If a client turns up and they've had a hell of a time and they're just, it's all just noise, I'll use black and white conversations to cut through all of that and to reach
Yeah.
them.
Well, you can get lost. It makes me think of my own profession, town planning, that I've done for a decade. We're a merits-based planning system. It means there's lots of grayness and ambiguity in the middle, and a lot of the language is kind of qualitative and interpretive. And lawyers have a field day picking apart what's the meaning of this phrase and this clause, and you do get stuck in it. You go like there's 100-page VCAT decisions, the tribunal, which is
So
the
that's where
arbitrator.
balance is important.
Yeah.
Grey is important, and black is important, and white is important.
Yeah, I mean, you can get lost in that space. And I think I appreciate what you said, that sometimes black and white thinking can be useful to cut through a lot of the fluff. If someone's spinning their tires and the grey, the middle ground.
So I used to want to be a policeman when I was little. And then the version that I've evolved into, I wonder how I'd go being a policeman because it's such a black and white world.
Mhm.
And I think I'd struggle to enforce the law, the black and white law, because I'd be too empathetic, I'd be too understanding, I'd be I don't know, but then maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd be like, I'd have to do what's required. Maybe I'd have to hold people accountable. It'd be super challenging, super challenging for me anyway.
I think I would be in the same boat.
So have we answered any of your questions? Have we touched on?
I think we spent a good 50 minutes or so going through. We probably touched on, well, unconscious mind beliefs. We definitely hit that. Understanding attachment, we hit that. Hit on some philosophy as well.
Bit of hypnotherapy.
Bit of hypnotherapy.
What are the power of silence? We'll finish up on that one, eh?
Yeah, so I did a silent meditation retreat over the break. So I've done a few of them now, and I do enjoy them. But I've always found them quite challenging, but come out the other side feeling lighter and more clear. And yeah, you've obviously done your Vipassana one, haven't you, Nick? Was that 10 or 14 days? You being silent now, you're sitting in silence, eh? Is that what we're doing for us?
I'm actually observing our body language and how in rapport we are.
I'm in sync. I'm smiling.
You've
Heads up at the
you've
table.
unconsciously started modeling me.
It's my training coming in. I'm mirroring
It is.
clients.
So what was the question? I was too
Yeah,
busy
you
being
did
silent.
the past night. Was that 10 or 14 days? Your one.
That was 10 days.
Yeah, cool. I feel like the longer they are, they seem to be more profound. The effects, I guess that's the way to frame it for me, anyway. Like the one I did was 5 nights, 6 days up in Hillsville. Shout out to Aruna Giri, and it was good. Like it was a nice kind of reset to get away and turn the phone off. It was funny. I didn't, I'm probably guilty of being a phone addict and all that, but I didn't miss it at all when I had it off and in the bag. Didn't look at it the whole time. So it was nice just to get away and
It's funny, isn't it? We tend to go into our phones to get stimulated and to occupy or engage the mind or distract it or whatever. If you sat there for 10 days and just listened to what goes on in your head, it's infinitely more hilarious than anything you'll find on TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or anything like that. You do not need your phone to be amused.
you don't. And you kind of only realize that when you're away from it for an extended period of time. Like you kind of body and mind adjusts in some capacity to the lack of stimulus. Like it does take a little while for that transition to happen. You're going from a busy world, work, phone, relationships, and all the rest of it, into kind of absence of any stimulus for multiple days, and that transition can take a while. But then when you get kind of settled in to a new rhythm and pace of the day, yeah, you're not like I didn't miss any of the stimulus from the phone. I do watch a lot of YouTube because I love knowledge and all that, as you know, and learning stuff. But it's like, yeah, when you're there, it's you adapt. I guess is the I don't know. The brain slows
But
down.
so it's interesting. It takes you a couple of days to reconfigure yourself, because the silence is all about reducing. You can't read, write, listen, so you can't talk to other people. So it's all designed to reduce the amount of stimulus that the mind's come into contact with. So it enables the person to be more present and more conscious and introspective, because the mind will still go looking for stimulus, but the only place it's going to find it is internally now.
Yeah,
So yeah,
and that's where the challenge is.
it takes you a couple of days to get into that headspace. But then when you go back into the real world, it definitely took me a couple of days to adapt. I had to, um, uh, I was hibernating in my room. I'd go out in little stretches and what's the word? Reintegrate myself back into society, into all the stimulus. It was hectic. It was so hectic.
It's like
Um,
reality slows down by a factor of 100.
well, I told you about my orange story.
Yeah,
When I ate the orange, and it's just mind blowing because you're so hyper present. Um, but it's not realistic. Like, it's not reality. And it's interesting, a lot of monks and people go off into monasteries or into the caves in the mountain and to do their work and whatnot, and that's great. But when we're teaching people meditation, I talk about that and say, um, once again, people have this notion that meditation should be done in perfect peace and silence. And for me, I get that, and yes, that can be effective, but I also think that meditating in chaos is more productive. It helps you to achieve. Um, if you can do it, it's so much more effective. Um, so you and I have spoken about it. We could both have easily donned the robe and wandered off into the monastery, but it's for me, no one else is going to benefit from that. That's I would benefit from it, or this incarnation of me would benefit from it. But I choose to stay in the chaos and do what I can to be that bridge, I suppose.
yeah, bring Eastern philosophies and meditation to the West and for your clients. I mean, you're right. I think you've changed more lives through Myndfit than you would have if you were off in the Himalayas meditating for 50 years.
And it would have been a fuckload easier for me, and it would have been so much more simple. And would it have been more joyful? I don't know. It would have no, it wouldn't have been. It would have been more peaceful. It would have been deeper. It would have been, But this is, rum dust grist for the mill. This is where it's at, man. Like, being in a relationship, having stepchildren, having pets, having a mortgage, running a business.
I've got a question. Would you be able to let go of your attachment of golf if you're off in an ashram somewhere in India?
I'd probably take a 7-iron with me.
Take back funds.
It's just no, just a 7-iron, just to keep that swing grooved.
Still come back and
Well,
take your funds.
that's interesting. When I went to Bhutan, I found a 9-hole golf course, and I played golf in Bhutan. That was fun.
They're
But,
very
yeah, all right. Well, hopefully the listeners have taken something out of that. I, I've, I think you and I have uh, a wonderful dynamic, as Hassan and I do. I think ours is probably different to Hassan and mine, which is hopefully going to be enjoyed by the listening people out there. because once again, if you too much of a good thing, I'm not saying Hassan are a good thing, but too much of something all the time can become a bit bland and tasteless. So hopefully this is like a bit refreshing for people. And I think there's a few more episodes where Hass can't do it. So while he's recovering in hospital from his lightning shark bite car crash. Yeah, we'll look at getting you on again and maybe even having another guest on and see what goes from there. So you've got a couple of weeks now to come up with some ideas.
Yeah, well, you might have exhausted my ideas for the year, but I'll see.
Try being me doing 130 odd episodes, having to come up with all the bloody ideas and content.
No, I'll brainstorm something.
I'm taking a break from it and handballing it off to you. So
yeah. Oh no, thanks for having me on. It was enjoyable, and I hope the listeners got something out of it. And apologies to anyone that was offended by my less than silky voice that Hass seems to have, but hopefully
the dulcet tones of Ryan Hassan.
Very good.
It was interesting. I used to compare my voice to Hass's and think, should I go and work at it? Should I go and da-da-da-da-da? And I was like, no, it's my voice. It's the way it is. Hass has got a lovely radio voice, and but imagine a world full of perfectly honed radio voices. There'd be no contrast. So,
well, I can go get surgery on my vocal cords, or I can just sound like Mitch. Whatever works.
And how you hear yourself is very different to how we hear you, and vice versa.
That's true. So, I hate hearing my own voice. I don't know if everyone does, but I don't like my own voice.
Well, M did that. M was filmed as part of Ava's documentary, The Queens of Concrete. Shout out to the Queens crew and go and check it out if you haven't. And when she first heard her voice, she had quite an ab reaction to it. And we had a chat about it. I said, it's the first time you've heard yourself. I said, that's very typical in sound because people get a shock. Is that how I sound? I'm like, no, it's how you interpret your voice. But the rest of us, I'll listen to podcast episodes and listen to myself, and because I did have a bit of an aversion to it initially, like most people, but now I'm very comfortable and at peace with it, and I don't judge the sound of my voice.
No attachment to sounding differently.
No attachment. Funny that.
Nice
All
one.
right, mate. Well, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, and I'll catch up with you later.
Thank you. Adios to everyone.
All right. Thanks. Peace out, everyone.
Bye.
Now.